Let me ask you something that might keep you up tonight. What if I told you that a common garden weed, something you've probably walked past 1,000 times, holds the power to kill the deadliest disease in human history? And what if I told you that the people who control modern medicine really don't want you growing it in your backyard? This isn't some fringe conspiracy theory cooked up in a basement somewhere. This is a story that ends with a Nobel Prize, begins in ancient China, and runs straight through a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry that would very much prefer you never heard any of it. We're talking about a plant that has saved more lives than penicillin, a plant that hunts cancer cells like a guided missile, and a plant that you can grow from a $5 packet of seeds. So buckle up, because this one's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about who gets to decide what medicine is. If you're into stories about suppressed knowledge and ancient wisdom that modern science can't ignore, smash that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started. Let's rewind the clock about 1,700 years to ancient China, the Eastern Qing dynasty specifically. A scholar named Qing Hao is putting together what you might call an emergency medical handbook. Think of it like a survival guide for when things go sideways and you don't have a doctor nearby. He calls it Emergency Prescriptions Kept Up One Sleeve, which honestly sounds like something you'd find in a martial arts movie. Inside this book, he documents hundreds of remedies, but one entry stands out. For intermittent fevers, what we now recognize as malaria, he prescribes a specific plant called Qing Hao. His instructions are weirdly specific. Take a handful of the herb, soak it in about half a gallon of water, wring out the juice, and drink it all. But here's the detail that seemed completely insignificant for 16 centuries. He never once mentions boiling it, not even a simmer, just cold water extraction. Everyone assumed it was just an oversight, some quirk of ancient medicine that didn't really matter. They were dead wrong. Fast forward to 1967, and the Vietnam War is raging. But here's something they don't tell you in the history books. Malaria was killing more soldiers than actual combat. We're talking about a microscopic parasite tearing through armies on both sides like a biological weapon. In China alone, 30 million cases every year and 300,000 deaths. The standard drugs weren't working anymore. Chloroquine failed. Quinine failed. The parasites had evolved, learned to resist everything modern science could throw at them. The world's most advanced militaries were getting destroyed by something they couldn't even see. So on May 23, 1967, the Chinese government holds an emergency meeting in Beijing and launches a secret military operation called Project 523. Their mission was simple, but nearly impossible. Find a cure before malaria decimates the entire military infrastructure. They screened over 240,000 compounds. Nothing worked. Then in January 1969, they brought in a pharmaceutical chemist named Tu Youyou. Her assignment? Go through ancient medical texts and find something that modern science somehow missed. Think about that for a second. The most advanced scientific minds in China hit a wall so hard that their only option was to crack open books from 1,000 years ago. Tu Youyou and her team screened over 2,000 traditional recipes and tested 380 herbal extracts from about 200 different plants. Most of them failed miserably. But one plant kept appearing in the old texts over and over again. Artemisia annua, commonly known as sweet wormwood. The experiments were frustrating at first. They boiled the wormwood according to standard scientific methods, and the results were all over the place. It would work one day and fail the next. Tu Youyou was completely baffled. The ancient texts clearly said this plant works, so what were they missing? Then she remembered Qing Hao's instructions from 340 AD. He never mentioned heat. That's when everything clicked. She realized that boiling water might be destroying the active compound entirely. So on October 4, 1971, using a low-temperature ether extraction instead of boiling water, Tu Youyou successfully isolated a compound that showed 100% effectiveness against malaria in mice and monkeys. But here's where it gets really interesting. Nobody knew if it was safe for humans. In an act of remarkable courage that honestly deserves way more recognition than it gets, Tu Youyou and two of her colleagues volunteered to be the first human test subjects. She later said that as head of the research group, she had the responsibility. They survived. Clinical trials followed. All 21 malaria patients in the first study recovered completely. They named the compound Qing Hao. The world now knows it as artemisinin. October 5, 2015, Stockholm, Sweden. Tu Youyou, now 84 years old, receives the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. She became the first mainland Chinese scientist to win a Nobel Prize in a scientific category, and she did it without a doctorate, without a medical degree, without any training abroad. Just ancient texts and persistence. Her acceptance speech was titled, "A Gift from Traditional Chinese Medicine to the World." And what a gift it was. So why does this plant work so devastatingly well? The secret lies in a molecular weapon hidden inside the leaves called an endoperoxide bridge, which is a rare chemical structure that reacts violently with iron. Here's how it works. Malaria parasites survive by feasting on hemoglobin in your red blood cells, which means they're absolutely loaded with iron. When artemisinin enters the parasite, it reacts with all that iron and the endoperoxide bridge breaks apart. This generates free radicals that essentially detonate a microscopic bomb inside the parasite. It kills them within hours, faster than any other anti-malarial drug in history. According to World Health Organization estimates, artemisinin-based drugs have reduced global malaria mortality by over 20%. In Africa alone, more than 100,000 lives are saved every single year. Some foundations call it arguably the most important pharmaceutical intervention in the last half-century. Now here's where things get uncomfortable. Despite all of this, the World Health Organization actively discourages people from using the whole plant. They don't want you growing it in your garden and making tea the way people did for 16 centuries. Their official reasoning involves concerns about standardization, dosage variability, quality control, and the potential for developing drug resistance. Sounds reasonable enough, right? Until you follow the money. The global artemisinin pharmaceutical market was worth somewhere between $75 and $96 million in 2024. Projections put it anywhere from $225 to $677 million by 2030. The artemisinin-based combination therapy market is even larger at $362 million in 2024, projected to reach $529 million by 2030. Major pharmaceutical giants have invested heavily in producing semi-synthetic artemisinin using genetically engineered yeast. This centralizes production, eliminates small farmers, and ensures artemisinin remains firmly under corporate control. Now compare that to the alternative. A packet of Artemisia annua seeds costs about $5 online. The plant thrives in poor soil and requires minimal water. It produces multiple harvests per year. One backyard garden could supply anti-malarial tea for months. If people in malaria-endemic regions simply grew this plant in their gardens and made tea, they wouldn't need to buy expensive pills from major pharmaceutical companies. The entire supply chain, from genetically modified yeast production to pharmaceutical manufacturing to distribution networks, would become completely unnecessary. The WHO's position protects that infrastructure. It protects those profit margins. But malaria is just the beginning of wormwood's story, and this is where the suppression becomes even more blatant. Since the early 1990s, researchers have discovered that the same mechanism that kills malaria parasites also targets cancer cells. Remember the iron thing? Malaria parasites hoard iron, but cancer cells are even worse. Cancer cells are metabolic monsters that require 5 to 15 times more iron than normal cells to sustain their rapid growth and division. They're essentially primed to explode the moment artemisinin enters the picture. Studies confirm that various species of Artemisia possess potent anthelmintic properties as well, meaning they kill parasitic worms. We're talking tapeworms, roundworms, pinworms. A 2017 study found that Artemisia absinthium extract caused paralysis, death, and structural damage to a common human tapeworm. Research on livestock showed that dietary wormwood supplementation reduced parasitic worm burdens in sheep infected with blood-sucking stomach worms. In developing countries where anti-parasitic drugs are expensive or unavailable, wormwood represents an accessible alternative. It grows readily, requires no pharmaceutical infrastructure, and has been used safely for millennia. Yet the major health organizations remain suspiciously silent on wormwood's anti-parasitic properties outside malaria. The emphasis stays entirely on pharmaceutical solutions. And there's another chapter to this story that shows exactly how easily plant reputations get destroyed when powerful interests are threatened. Wormwood has a cousin called Artemisia absinthium, better known as the primary ingredient in absinthe. In the late 19th century, absinthe was the drink of Europe. Van Gogh drank it. Toulouse-Lautrec drank it. Oscar Wilde drank it. Ernest Hemingway drank it. They called it the Green Fairy. It was also blamed for madness, violence, and moral collapse. The catalyst came in 1905 when a Swiss man murdered his wife and 2 daughters in a drunken rage. The press focused exclusively on the 2 glasses of absinthe he had consumed before the killings. They conveniently ignored that he had also consumed cognac, brandy, wine, and beer. The man was a chronic alcoholic who had been drinking since breakfast, but the damage was done. Prohibitionists claimed wormwood caused psychosis and invented a condition called absinthism. By 1915, absinthe was banned across Europe and the United States. Then, in the 1990s, scientists actually tested vintage bottles of pre-ban absinthe. The thujone levels averaged 1.3 milligrams per liter, far below anything needed for psychoactive or toxic effects. The French wine industry, which had long viewed cheap absinthe as competition, had actively lobbied for the ban. It was a trade war disguised as public health. The European Union lifted bans in 1998. The United States followed in 2007, a century of prohibition based on lies and corporate interests. The parallel to today is obvious. Control the narrative about safety, create regulatory barriers, then monopolize the extracted compounds. So here's where we stand. We have a plant used safely for 1,600 years, validated by a Nobel Prize, proven to kill parasites faster than any drug on the market, and showing massive potential against cancer cells. And yet, the authorities tell you it's dangerous to grow it in your garden. They tell you standardization is more important than access. But standardization is just another word for centralization, for corporate control, for profit protection. Is wormwood a miracle cure-all? No. Does it have limitations? Absolutely. Raw plant material does vary in artemisinin content based on growing conditions. But the question you have to ask yourself is this: who benefits from you not knowing about it? Not people in malaria-endemic regions who lack pharmaceutical access. Not cancer patients seeking affordable complementary therapies. Not communities wanting healthcare self-sufficiency. The beneficiaries are pharmaceutical companies protecting their market share and regulatory agencies maintaining institutional control. One packet of seeds costs $5. One pharmaceutical prescription costs hundreds. One generation of knowledge passed down versus a lifetime of dependence on pills you cannot afford. In 2015, Tu Youyou said in her Nobel acceptance speech that artemisinin is a true gift from old Chinese medicine and that this is not the only instance in which ancient wisdom has borne fruit. She was acknowledging something modern medicine consistently downplays. Ancient plant wisdom tested across millennia of human use often contains profound therapeutic value. They can ban a bottle, they can discourage a tea, but they cannot patent a weed. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Is this suppression justified, or is it corporate control disguised as public health? Subscribe and hit that notification bell because the next vault opens soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss it.